company called Comes With Fries, and we are a marketing services company out of Sydney, and we work with a lot of independent artists tailoring campaigns to their needs. And pretty much the reasons what we do within our business is take all of these services to try and get us through this particular point within the cycle. Now, we are talking about A&R, so a lot of the work that I do within this space is with independent artists, so I do have a slight A&R hat on within the role, except what I did for this presentation is actually speak to some of my nearest dearest that actually work within A&R to answer some of the questions that I actually have in relation to data. So I'm going to take you through pretty much what they do on a day-to-day basis, some of the questions that I have, and actually give you a bit of an insight into their world. So for me, pretty much data is the everyday equalizer. And what I mean by that is what are these A&R teams doing on a day-to-day basis to kind of cut through? The first one is very much using it as a source. So they're still getting demos across their desk. They're still going out to live gigs, but they're on a daily basis eyeballing platforms like Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, to really monitor the movements and identify those artists that are actually cutting through online. And with that, and this was just a conversation that we had just then, Steve, it's about then making informed decisions about where they want to go next and how they're going to go next. Sorry, the slides moved around. So what we're doing is seeing that we're getting closer and closer every day to understanding that consumer behaviour and making decisions on what tracks could potentially cut through. We're also engaging about being in the moment. So we're constantly using this data to get a sense of where the song or the artist may be within that world and that noise, and understanding how the potential of them to take forward. The big thing for me with the conversation was also about that instinct side of things. So one of the quotes that I had from one of the A&R managers I worked with was about it's the sediment of the track that actually pulls you in. And that for me is a really big point when it comes to using data and A&R, because it's not just about the head making all the decisions, it's also balancing the heart and the head within this decision. So we need to make sure that that instinct is pretty loud and clear. Another area of A&R and data, which they're eyeballing on a day-to-day basis, is about building sustainable careers for these artists. A lot of the A&R teams are not about taking that 5 minutes of fame. It's about establishing a road that these artists can actually build on a career and make sure that they've got a sustainable income moving forward. And all the time and energy that they're doing within an A&R capacity about the signing and investing and developing, they want to make sure that that can translate from song to song to hit to hit. Another interesting area of the conversation was about the voice. So it's not just about the song that's cutting through that noise online, it's also about delivering that voice. So how are these artists that they're eyeballing that are actually cutting through and creating some buzz, actually connecting and talking to their fans, because it's their fans that are really going to be driving the commercial value moving forward. So they're really interested in how the data is actually allowing them to determine those fans that are cutting through via their voice. The last point here is that it's getting pretty hard to sign those buzz bands, and it's getting harder and harder to sign artists when all the A&R teams are eyeballing the same level of data coming through, the same level of platforms. And what is happening is getting to a point where these buzz bands are actually overblowing the deal terms and often getting hungry to try and capitalise on that 5 minutes of buzz fame. And the A&R teams that I spoke to are trying to balance out whether or not this buzz artist actually has the potential to carry through from a long term into a sustainable career. And it's making the decision to sign certain artists harder and harder within their role. So apart from just eyeballing data on a day-to-day basis, it's all about how they're going to connect the dots as well. And for me, a lot of part of my job is about navigating that landscape, and so too from an A&R perspective. So these are the key areas in how they're looking to determine to connect the dots. Platforms. We've spoken a lot about platforms in this whole conference. It's about finding the platforms that you trust as well. There's so many platforms out there that are dictating the numbers out to all different teams in the music industry, but it's the A&R guys that have really identified those platforms that they trust in order to make their informed decisions. Another key part of it is about that market understanding, so taking the online and the offline conversation into fold. So what's happening at radio, TV, sync, even seasonal festivals and whatnot, making sure that they understand that whatever tractions within the world of metrics, it spikes and all of that chatter, that they're applying this market understanding so they can cut through and make sense of this data. The other thing is information. It's just making sure that they can gather as much information all the time so they're making more and more sense of that data in hand. It's really important that they've got to make sure that they're evaluating what's being pushed to them rather than taking it at face value. The perfect point and the perfect conversation that I had many a times is that good music will always find its way. And it's like, you know, over the course of this 2 days, it's been great to meet like-minded people that talk about how there is no doubt that anytime you hear something good, that great music will constantly find an audience and constantly cut through in the digital world. This is a really big point about the distinction of A&R. So it's not just about signing those artists that can sell then and there, it's about developing and delivering an artist within their capacity. And for me, it's about monitoring and that conversation of a real motivator for that artist to continue, because with people like Troye Sivan, for example, who was signed through EMI a number of years ago, his first material's only been out for the last 6 months with his EP. The team behind that actually took the time to develop him, work a path, allow him to develop his own voice, develop his YouTube profile, personality, and then worked into his music, even though he was signed off the back of talent competitions back in Perth. This is another area that a lot of marketeers and also A&R are looking at, and it's about learning from your mistakes. And this is a really important factor because actively working within the digital space, we have the ability to actually look at the data and know what the fans are connecting with, be it right or wrong, but it's what we can do from learning from those wins and those mistakes to proactively and reactively move forward can allow us to cut through, especially from an A&R and a talent sourcing perspective. Another big point that they pressed on is about don't be dictated by the data. And this is really kind of key because we can get so lost in the numbers, we can get so lost in the platforms, we can get so lost in what is something telling us and we lose that gut instinct about that particular song. So half of their job is also to make sure that they're putting their ears on and making sure that they believe in the product that are putting out there so they can combat the fact that maybe the numbers aren't in their favour, however they can move forward. Music by numbers is probably the next area, and this is something that's been touched on over the conference for the last couple of days as well. Is that about, you know, what are the revenue channels that the A&R teams are eyeballing in order to make this world sustainable? Licensing is a no-brainer. So this is about the extremely lucrative and exciting part of the business. With more and more big companies coming into the fold, they'll continue to license their catalogue out through. But the reason why I put co-writes on the same line as this is because equally from the big part of the pie through to the small part of the pie, from an A&R perspective, they're really eyeballing and using the internet to connect artists with artists, allow that talent to breed talent scenario where we're closing the gap that artists can connect with other artists and actually make a small amount of income through from co-writes in the publishing side. And this is a big potential and something that needs to be pressed with a lot of artists out there, that they need to continue to keep writing in their craft. Brand deals, Ruth just covered all of that, so it was perfectly timed to kind of add that into the fold. Monetization, we spoke a lot of that with YouTube yesterday and other channels to make sure that we have that value associated with the product that we're putting out there. Again, ownership, this is a big area of the business from a publishing point of view and also a metadata conversation that we've all been banging on about at the conference as well. It's really making sure that the value and the ownership of that product is actually the right information, is delivering the funds through to that. So that flow of funds back into the artist is a key thing that a lot of people in A&R are eyeballing. And the last point is really an interesting one here, and I think it's a topic of conversation that I didn't want to have, but I had to ask the question. It's just like being in A&R and so many big hits that are happening overnight, is there some kind of formula that they can replicate to kind of keep that commercial insight coming through the business? And while they didn't want to go into detail, but being true A&R people, they do recognise that there is a lot of formula A&R happening out there in the market. However, true to what they believe in developing and working with an artist rather than just replicating that formula or those markers within the song in order to commercialise and generate more money for the business. So they were a big point of that was making sure that they strongly agreed that you've got to let art shine through and be true to that art world. So just going into a bit of the last side of things, this is very much where our conversation leads us to. It's the future. It's what lies ahead on the horizon for the music industry and A&R, and these are some of the key areas that they're looking at. One of the big things is there is going to be constantly more disposable global hits coming through, just the nature of the beast with buzz bands and the internet providing that platform for them to break through. A big area of conversation was about this affordable aggregation, making sure that the platforms that we're using to find new talent, to work new talent, and to get that data, companies like Next Big Sound and things like that are doing a great job to push this product out there and to push the data out there. But again, we still need that tailored effect as to what information I need to get from these platforms in order to work with my artists themselves. So having an affordable, white-labeled version of a platform that we can have a bespoke need for what terms, what insights, what data do I need to aggregate in order to give to my artists, my marketing team, and the wider team is something that they're going to be eyeballing. At the moment, there is no solution that's affordable for even the major labels out there. They tell me. The other thing is resourcing, making sure that you're getting the right teams in the right companies and resourcing up in this respect. So building the teams like insert managers like Sonia are doing, and making sure that those managers are the experts in their field and feeding the rest of the businesses so people like A&R and marketeers can solidify their business decisions based on the correct data coming through. A big one that I also agree with is this trusted and accredited sources. There's so much data out there, it's like who's right, who's wrong, I don't know. So it's making sure that we can kind of go out there and get some accredited and verified sources that we can lean on so that moving forward, the data that we're using to make informed decisions, we know that it's actually coming from a correct source. This was a really great quote from one of the major label A&R managers that I spoke with, and it was, no silver bullet to data, it's just another tool. And this was another really important point in the conversation because we wanted to make sure that the conversation about computer and the human element remained in creating and generating great music. And this is where data and the platforms that we're using should be seen as a tool. Therefore, the role of an A&R manager in developing and working with that artist and honing that artist should always remain intact. The closing the gap side of things from a future point of view is really about closing the gaps from the music industry, the business, between the majors, the indies, kind of equalising the playing field, but also it's about closing the gaps between the artists and the fans directly. And this is a big point that more A&R managers are getting closer to the marketing teams, the insights team, so they can use that data to best leverage the potential for their bands to cut through. And the key last point is more about the big P word, passion. And I think I'm kind of ending the presentation on passion because someone in a bedroom somewhere is starting to create music and they've got the passion to create that music. And I think it's the same for those untalented people in the room. The reason why I work in the music industry is because I love music. And I think that we never need to lose sight of the reasons why we're all here in the first place, that we're not going to be dictated by the data. We're not going to be creating music for the sake of creating music. A lot of the time we're creating because we actually love what we do. And I think we need to make sure that we add that passion in everything that we do. That's pretty much me in a nutshell.